Food you can trust. Find out why some of the best produce in the world comes from your own backyard here in Perth. Visit foodyoucantrust.org.au. In today's podcast, WAFarmers CEO Trevor Whittington talks with global supply chain specialist Brett Heather about agriculture, avocados, apiary and alliteration.
Whittington, I'm the CEO of WAFarmers.
I'm Brett Heather.
Right, so we're in business. What are we here to talk about today, Brett?
Waiting to hear from you, Trevor.
Okay, I think we've got a script, but I'm very bad at following scripts. I think we're going to talk about agriculture, Western Australian agriculture, a bit of global agriculture, noting your experience, and a bit of domestic avocado agriculture, which is also your experience. Yeah, and you can even throw bees in there.
Okay, if you want. We'll see where the conversation goes.
Okay, so why are you back? You know, you're a global player, worked globally around the world, have been involved in supply chains internationally. I thought agriculture was all happening overseas.
It is. I think I've taken my fair share of lashings overseas, dealing with the retailers over there. They're not the easiest people to deal with. I had 12 years away, working there in the UK and travelling out to about 20 different countries around the world, year after year after year, working with growers, the same growers who became friends over time, bringing produce back into the UK. And then our friends...
This is mostly horticulture?
Mostly horticulture, yeah. It's really grapes, stone fruit, so peaches, nectarines, plums, apricots.
So for the big supermarkets?
For the big supermarkets in the UK, yeah. Which was, we had to have that fresh produce on the shelf 365 days of the year. If we didn't have that on the shelf for a couple of days, it was like sitting down with a buyer with a shotgun. How dare you not have product on our shelf? 10 big retailers in the UK, all fighting for that consumer, all fighting for footfall. If the rest of them have got something on the shelf, why don't we? They were brutal conversations. So it was that level of thing. So that equally then gets applied to the growers. That we have programs with the growers. We've got to have that fresh produce back in the UK to meet our programs. We're running those just-in-time supply chains, so we didn't have fruit sitting in a cold store for a month that we could just wheel out when we needed to. Freshness, quality was paramount. Just in time was really important to us. And then what happened? A boatload of the guys came over from the UK to good old Coles with their big sticks and started demanding similar high standards that were being demanded over there in the UK. So there was a real shake-up in Australia around that.
So how long ago was that?
It's probably 10 years ago now. I think I've been back for about that long now. And so, the guys were looking for those skill sets out of the UK. So that brought me back to Australia, based out of Melbourne there, and really trying to put process in place to meet up with what these retailers wanted.
So is Australian agriculture behind what's happening internationally in the horticultural sector in terms of production and quality?
Yeah, look, it's different for different sectors, but if we're generalising and we go back to 10 years ago, it was definitely behind where it was out there in that global marketplace. Particularly the UK guys, because we were able to pay a premium back then. And as I say, I'd fly into Chile, into Santiago, I'd go into Brazil, to Argentina, into South Africa. I'd work over in Spain and Italy and Greece. I'd get into Israel, into Egypt, and work with these growers there. They wanted to supply the UK. And so when I came in, I'd be auditing them. So I'd be auditing to labour standards, for example. I'd go and do audits on food safety and what they're doing with the chemicals and pesticides. We would be able to test MRL tests, so chemical test in the UK, samples of fruit. And it's no longer, it's parts per million of chemistry that you can find on fruit, and also parts per billion now. So, if you're using the wrong chemistry, there's no hiding from that. So the bar was incredibly high that was there.
So I was a stone fruit grower for my sins.
The conversations,
I had 32,000 plum trees down south, and I got out 15 years ago, and none of these systems were in place.
Yeah.
So we were producing for both the domestic market, but mostly for export, going to Hong Kong and into the grey trade, into China.
Yeah.
And there was no MRL testing. The quality expectations were very basic. As a result, the variance of quality, what you saw in the markets, what you saw on the shelves, was all over the place. And what is a magnificent fruit, a plum, the stone fruit, people were picking too green, the varieties were terrible, people weren't changing varieties fast enough. Our systems were way behind what you'd even see in Europe, and let alone our big competitor markets, which was probably Chile and internationally. So we just got run into the ground, and so we exited. And I suspect, and you've probably seen it across Australia, the number of growers has just been declining at the rate of knots.
Yeah, it's tough.
And the size of operations who's remained has probably expanded.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was competition, was it? Back
two things. We were chasing the Chinese market, and we did really well.
Yeah.
But then the Chileans and the South Africans got better.
Yeah.
And we could air freight in to capture Chinese New Year. But China's a hard place to deal with, and it's very hard to find Mr. Lee in China when he owes you $250,000 because.
Yeah, right.
But there's a lot of Mr. Lees who would like your fruit.
Yeah.
And we're pretty unsophisticated in the global trading world, and we learnt some pretty brutal lessons. But so extrapolate that out to other sectors of agriculture, which is another bit of background I've got, which is broadacre grains and livestock. I suspect that we are in the reverse of horticulture. We're probably cutting edge in the world in terms of supply chain, SCAS, animal welfare, testing, MRLs, and so you're either at right up there at the best in the world, or you're in terminal decline in agriculture.
Yeah, no, it's tough. I don't think there's a more difficult product type than stone fruit. Stone fruit, and I had an enormous amount of involvement in stone fruit. Just the varietal development that goes on in that space, really driving that eating quality, really driving that shelf life, driving the aesthetics. So you've got nectarines now that are full red colour that they weren't once upon a time. They never looked as beautiful as they do today. The breeders there, I used to spend a lot of time in California, flying in and out, visiting them, in France, in Israel as well. We wanted the latest genetics for that eating quality, that come to Brett's store, come to Waitrose, don't go to the competition. So the guys as growers, to keep up with that, it was brutal because, as you well know, it's not cheap. Cutting varieties out, top working into these new varieties, trying to keep up with that. How do you keep up with that as well as a business?
Picking the right varieties, and then learning how to grow them, because they're all slightly different.
And you can miss that picking time by a few days. The plums, they've gone soft, so they're getting rejected from the supermarket. How do you prune them as well to optimise the pruning? Pollination. It's
getting the bees working at the right time.
Getting the bees working, exactly. There's a lot of complexities to it all. The amount of labour that's needed for your pruning and your picking as well.
So I'm still stunned at the price the consumer is getting away with paying. You're buying stone fruit for around, even at this time of the year, which is still early.
Yeah.
I reckon the best stone fruit doesn't kick in here until Christmas, because you just haven't had time to develop those sugars and those flavours. But you're buying stone fruit for $5 a kilo. And this is small fruit. Problem with small fruit, your labour content goes through the roof.
Yep.
And eating quality's average. Why people buy it? They buy it, had a bad experience. They don't come back when it tastes better. But it's still it's cheap now, and even though there's not big volumes out there, and it just gets cheaper. So maybe our fruit just is too cheap, or maybe we're just not a sophisticated consumer of fruit.
Yeah. Probably a combination of both. It is cheap, and it's just purely that supply and demand, isn't it? It's amazing to see. So areas of Renmark have opened up with that early season stone fruit. There's some growers there of some phenomenal scale there. I think there's more and more collaboration going on within growers. So I know the guys there in Renmark, there's a group of growers that do work together. They work together in that varietal space. They work together in the packing space, the marketing. So they've been able to accumulate these fairly sophisticated skill sets that we're talking about as a group. and then get to scale. I know Swan Hill's opened up more and more in terms of early production. I remember actually going to California, and it was with one of Australia's largest marketers of stone fruit, and they bought this huge grower over from Swan Hill. And we were looking at this pack house, and the American owner there is showing us this pack house, and it's phenomenal. It's like football pitches worth of packing facility. And he's rattling off all these numbers of what he packed in a day and a week and a year. And this fella from Swan Hill, Big Nick, he bumps me. He says, "Oi, Shags. Do you know what he just said?" I said, "Nick, I have no idea, but it sounded like a big number." He said, "Well, this bloke packs in a day. He would pack back in Swan Hill in an entire year."
Wow.
The scale out there is absolutely phenomenal. That would be one of Australia's largest growers. So that consolidation the planet over has continued to move ahead, and it's that accumulation of skill sets. You can get those experts into your business with scale. So whether it's California, the other side of the planet, or here in little old WA or nationally, it's marching ahead.
So I got a Californian story. 20 years ago, we picked up a Telstra Business Award for stone fruit. We went for a joint around the world looking at supply chains and marketing. And we're in California, and we're talking in an office with six guys, and there's a bunch of people in the background buying and selling. And they had been ex-buyers and sellers for big corporates, and they'd gone out and set up on their own. And their contracts were to fill supermarket shelves across the Midwest of, like literally hundreds of supermarkets. And they were buying and trading and supplying of fruit. So, and they had colour charts up there. So you always had to have your bananas, and you always had to have your oranges and your apples as your sort of staples.
Yeah.
And then what was coming into season, what they could buy, grapes out of Israel, or so berries out of Morocco or something. And they were moving stuff around, and I was stunned how few of people there was. They had a whole bunch of people on the road, probably doing what you were doing, dealing with growers, but the scale of their supply chains and what they were turning over dwarfed what we had here. So we were overcapitalised in Western Australia. There's probably, I don't know, growers have their own pack houses, and then there's the Donnybrooks and the Manjimups and the Curups. I've been travelling down through Chile, and every 10 kilometres you'd see a shed the size of a CBH. Huge football-sized shed, field-sized shed, and that was the pack house. And it was brand new, it was spanking. It was at another scale. But it's probably at the sort of scale that, our broadacre, our grain growers are when you come here, and you just can't believe the size of the farms. But it is changing. So
they're big investments too, those packing facilities. You got optical graders in there now looking at all these different defects. They've got machinery to look at the sugars, the sweetness of the fruit, and they can adjust that and put very sweet fruit in a premium box versus others. The capital investment in those packing facilities is phenomenal. So definitely working together, coming together in some sort of cooperative, rather than seeing the neighbour as the competitor. And I think what will happen is we've been very domestic market focused within horticulture. So it has been the neighbour being my competitor, because I am supplying Coles or Woolies or whoever, IGA, whoever it may be. But I think as we start to look at the big wide world out there, we actually understand, your story points to the Chile. They are competitors, and they do a very good job. South Africa will be the same. So I think we'll evolve with that.
So the last question, back to the avos. Is that the route you're going down with your avocados in terms of, trying to match the best in the world?
So the avocado story, I think, is a really interesting one, and particularly for Western Australia. So fairly uniquely on the horticultural scale, Western Australia produces between 25 to 30% of the national production. So there's not too many horticultural products where we're of significant scale like that. I think citrus, for example, is only a couple of % of the national production.
Carrots is probably the only other one.
Yeah, carrots. Yeah, they're another big one up north of Perth. But yeah, so I think there's some real opportunities there, and part of that is this really unique climate that's down there in Manjimup, Pemberton. The soil type's phenomenal. The water quality and quantity is there as well. And yeah, so the view of the world is to export. We know there's a lot of avocados being produced. You were saying earlier about the price of avocados, and yeah, it's right up there at the moment. That'll come down with supply, but we very much see working with the growers down there as being a real positive for us. So, we haven't gone in there thinking, we're a corporate business and we're going to show the locals how to do it. I think a lot of the locals have been doing it for a long time and do a very good job, and we've been learning a lot from them. And what we're able to do as well is take some of these international linkages. So some of the guys I know over in Spain, for example, or some of the connections we've got into Israel, some of the connections East Coast, and take some of those learnings as well and bring them in to what we're doing with our development, and equally sharing some of those insights that for those that are interested.
So you're probably lucky. It's a relatively new industry. Avo's in WA. 20 years plus or minus, and so it doesn't have some of the baggage of some of the old skills, and old ways of doing things, and it's caught that wave of market interest in that particular fruit, and the smashed avo, generation coming through.
Yeah,
maybe that's going to be one of the horticultural areas that, outside of carrots and probably premium wine, that Western Australia can excel in. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the official Food You Can Trust podcast. Until next time, goodbye.